Hello, everyone. You're listening to the Small Business Show. I'm your host, Swire. You can also call me the promo guy. My guest today is David S. from Current Global LLC. David also leads to a successful entrepreneur who product, the StatGuardPlus.com, is now available in over 3,700 retail stores, including giant like the Home Depot, Lowe's, and True Value Hardware. He's currently working on his book titled The Guardians of Grit, which aims to empower father in raising uncrushable young people. Grounded in science-based approach that distinguish between grit and resilience, David's book explore how knowledge can fundamentally shape one call's identity. Welcome to the show, David.
Hey, thank you for having me. Pleasure to be here.
Seems like you have a lot going on, and you're writing a book, you're running a business. For listeners who are tuning in, how did you decide to start your own business, and can you tell us a little bit about the backstory?
Yeah, sure. So, it's interesting. I grew up in a little town in Minnesota. I now live in Nashville, Tennessee, but I was always drawn to people who, were business owners and really the entrepreneur type. I was always fascinated by people that kind of had, multiple revenue streams and things like that. And so I kind of had this idea that someday, I would kind of head in that direction, but I really didn't have any idea what that might be. And so about 10 years ago, my brother-in-law called me one day and he said, hey, David, where do I get a thermostat guard with a combination lock? He said, everybody keeps losing that little key. Well, what was interesting is I was actually working for a large telecom chain in facilities management and, over, multiple states. And of course, every one of our locations, we use thermostat guards because everybody kept messing around with the temperature. And of course, it got pretty costly and caused a lot of problems. And I knew, of course, when he brought that up, that lost key problem was a real issue. So long story short, he and I went into business together and developed a product. I ended up buying him out shortly after that. And then ended up, kind of fortuitously, getting some traction in retail with Home Depot and Lowe's, and just recently this year with True Value Hardware and so on. And I'm just grateful that I kind of found something, that was valuable in the marketplace. And I'm one of those people that I don't care if I'm selling, whatever widget it is. I just so appreciate, just the opportunity, to have, a product that is valuable and that people like. And I think I like being creative. I like, marketing. I like shaking hands. I like selling. I like doing all the things that, that go into selling a widget. And again, I'm just grateful I found something that was valuable in the marketplace.
Thank you for sharing, David. And I know that, as, classic entrepreneur spirit, you went all into your ventures. I've been wanted to ask this question, and I think, you probably can answer this pretty well is, what makes you decided I'm going all in? Like, I don't just wanted to tiptoe into it. If I'm going to do it, I'm going to all in. Like, can you talk about that mindset a little bit?
Yeah, it was a little bit of a progression. So, initially when I started that with a partner, kind of the load, as it were, was carried by, two of us. So it didn't necessarily seem as scary. What was kind of interesting though is there was a point in the business that I had a choice to make because our initial distributor went out of business. And I had to, on my own then say, well, I need to make new, plastics injection molds for this, thermostat guard and order some product. And well, of course, that was tens of thousands of dollars. And it's funny. I hang out with a lot of people whose risk meter is, a 10. And I would say that mine is probably a 3 or a 4. So that was a season for my wife and I that, was difficult because in order to do that, we had to, kind of put every penny into it. The nice thing is at that point, of course, we had already sold some product. So I knew that it wasn't necessarily that we were going to just completely lose our money. At the same time, I wasn't guaranteed that we were going to find placement, real quickly. And of course, in retail, which seemed at the time, honestly, like a complete pipe dream.
Yeah. What if you think you didn't go all in? Like, what do you think would happen?
Yeah, I probably would have had, 10,000 thermostat guards sitting in a garage still. And, it's a hard thing, when you say go all in. I think what's really the kind of behind all of that is, the person in the mirror, right? It's like you're looking in the mirror thinking, do I have what it takes? Not just, literally financially, scaring up some cash is not necessarily a hard problem. If you have a product that is viable, the real issue quite often is do I believe that I have what it takes to call a multi-billion dollar, corporation and have that conversation, to stand in that room. And so out of the gate, I suffered a lot of imposter syndrome and, just a lot of fear. And of course, you just push through those things. And once you kind of get a win here and here, win there, the confidence kind of starts to build and so on. At the same time, it was fascinating. Back then, I started doing some deeper work, kind of internal work, building self-awareness, and that kind of thing as to who I am and who I'm not, and to make decisions based upon, the things that I value, and to show up in a way that's authentic to me and not try to parrot, or mimic someone else that I, might have looked up to. I really I think that was a really interesting season of life. I really wanted to operate, in a way that was, that was me, and to build relationships, that were authentic and so on. And I still do that, but it was kind of a neat season of life. I felt like there were two worlds colliding, this external world, as it were, of entrepreneurship, and then this internal world of, me kind of rising into the truest version of myself. So it was a real pivotal time of life for me.
Yeah, that's very interesting. And I think I need to ask you this follow-up question. And since you've been through the experience, and obviously don't give us all your secrets, right? Working with a larger organization, in your case, maybe 100 times bigger. Like sometimes
Oh, yeah.
we do come a point, something like that, an opportunity, right? So we're in business for a while, so we're doing good work, and maybe a competitor, not a competitor, maybe a company who is 100 times or much larger than us want to buy from you. So obviously the term is most favorable to them, right? You have
Sure.
to do a lot of things. You might need to get more machine, hire more people. Maybe you have to hold the product development phase for a little bit. Can you walk us through that process? Like, how do you make sure that at the end, financially, it works for you? At the end, I'm making money, right? That's why I'm getting into it. And then you're able to produce or perform what they ask of you. Like, can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah, yeah. So I'll kind of tell you the story, really. So I remember the day that I got the call. We had multiple conversations and so on, and I was actually sitting on the tarmac at Nashville International, getting ready to fly somewhere, and I got the call, and they said, "Hey, David, we would like to move forward. We really like your product, and we'd like to put you in our stores." And the one question from them was, "Can you do that?" It's I mean, really, right? There's a lot of products out there that would sell. There's no question, right? The
Mhm.
real estate on those shelves is worth a lot of money, and they're responsible not only to their own, upper management, but to shareholders. So they protect that real estate, very, very tightly. But that the question of can you do that? It's a really legitimate question. Meaning, do you have the money to buy inventory to stock the shelves one time? In 2,000 stores, let alone keep another 20,000 units sitting around to restock and another container on the water. Do you understand supply chain management? Do you have, are you well capitalized in order to pull this off? And what's funny is in that moment, I remember listening to Richard Branson, Virgin Atlantic, and he said, when an opportunity comes your way, say yes and figure it out. So, in that moment when he asked me, "Can you do this?" Well, on a very practical level, the answer was absolutely not. I've got a great job, but I don't. Not only do I not have the, the business acumen to pull that off, but I didn't have the capital.
Mm.
But I said absolutely, and it was interesting how the other opportunities kind of presented themselves. So I ended up finding a partner and licensing my product to them. And they've been a really great partner for, I guess, 7 years now. So they handle retail, for me, and then, other in manufacturing and so on. And then I can, use those same units to sell elsewhere as well. So it's been a really, really great opportunity. And I remember, by the way, one of my mentors, um, it would have been his birthday today. He passed away a few months ago. His name is Dan Miller, and he wrote the book 48 Days to the Work You Love and No More Mondays, and just a wonderful human being. But I remember when I got that call, I called Dan, and he'd been there, done that. He was an older man who'd been been around the block a lot, and he kind of started asking me really helpful questions and starting to identify the gaps and things and people that I needed to to partner with and so on. And it's amazing, this idea of saying yes to something and figuring it out. It's not how, there's that book, right? Who, not how. It's rarely how. It's quite often who are the who's, that you need in your life to help you enter that next, that next phase and level up. And I was grateful to, have someone kind of hold my hand during that time and help me to find the right people.
Thank you, David. I think you sounds really calm. You make it sound easy, but I think at that time probably you're like running around. And thanks for sharing that story. It's
Yeah.
really wonderful to hear that you answer that call, you figure it out, and now you're successful in the products that you do.
Yeah, and to your point there, right? Did I have a lot of sleepless nights? You're darn right I did. And I can't tell you how many nights I laid in bed at 3 a.m, like, what in the world am I even doing here? And it's kind of interesting, when you start leveling up to certain seasons of life. It's by the way, I mentioned earlier this imposter syndrome. My friend Chris Kelso, he actually wrote the book Overcoming the Imposter. And in his book, it was super helpful for me. He said that you need to change your vocabulary from imposter to explorer, meaning if you're doing something new, on any level, you're busting new ground, right? You're busting sod out west or whatever that is. You're not an imposter. Of course, you don't have what it takes. Of course, you don't know what to do. Of course, you don't know how to handle something. You've never done it before. So you are an explorer. And that paradigm really started to shift, my ability to lean in and do hard things and navigate the man in the mirror, as it were.
Yeah, I love that. And I want to use another sports analogy. I remember, my daughter, one of her coach in soccer said, you can never score a goal if you don't shoot. Like,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
have to try it. Like you'll miss, right?
Yeah.
And then or you might not able to score for a while, but if you never shoot, you will never score.
Yeah. And it's, what's interesting too is, this idea of shooting and scoring. A lot of people, I'll just ask the question, why don't some people take the shot? And I think it's because they're just afraid that if they miss, that that somehow they will be a failure, right? It's kind of an identity statement. It's an internal identity dialogue that's happening, that if I don't succeed in this area, I am something. And if I do succeed, I am something. Well, when you really start getting down to the kind of brass tacks, we realize, no, I'm not whatever that is, right? I'm not a doctor. I'm not a plumber. I'm not an entrepreneur. That might be something that I do. That's a context for how I express myself. And of course, I'm going to see wins and losses and things like that in all areas of life. But I think that, when we, are shooting for something big, as it were, we tend to have a lot of fear because we're afraid that if we fail, that somehow we become, something less than.
Mhm.
And it's that fear that you just have to, honestly, you've got to get up in the morning, grab that fear by the back of the neck and throw it out the window and just get rid of it, because it's unfounded. It's a falsehood that we really need to understand for what it is.
Well, but if you show me a person who miss or fail, right, in what we're talking about, but still remain in the game, I would say that person do the experience. Imagine Then
Yeah.
you're shooting, you're missing, you're still at it. So then you know that I learned from my mistake.
Yeah.
Maybe I have to do this better, or maybe I have to prepare in a different way so I could get better. So I would assure you that that person had that experience, and eventually they're going to get better.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. And it's, yeah, who do you want advice from, right? You want somebody who's got some scars. You want somebody who's been, down the path and been punched in the face a few times and, kept getting up. And quite often we look to the people for advice that look all shiny and, fancy and this and that. And it's a big facade. I want somebody who can look at me and say, David, I know where you've been. You've got this. It's going to be okay. And let's do this.
Yeah. And this lead on to a great segue. David, you have talked about the mentor that you have, and I know that you belongs to a couple of different mastermind group, and you put this on the notes that you sent me, and I think it really resonated with me. And elaborate on this, please. You became the people you spend the most time with. Why
Yeah.
do you
So
say that, and how do you think that really changes by spending time with the right people?
yeah. So I got that from Jim Rohn. You become like the top 5 people you spend the most time with. Well, here's I'll just kind of drill into the ground. Why is that a law like gravity? Well, guess what? Those of us who have children, we know very instinctively we don't want our children hanging out with the wrong crowd, right? I don't want my kids hanging out with the thugs. I don't want my kids hanging out with people who look like they're going to rob somebody.
Mhm.
Why? Because we know full well that our children will be, they're going to rub off. So, but here's the funny thing. We often don't think about that for ourselves. Life kind of gets busy and, you become more of a human doing than a human being. And you don't think about some of those things. And what's amazing is, and I'm not saying that we can't have, friends and acquaintances and so on, but that inner circle, the people that you let into your inner world, the people that you talk about your dreams and goals and, gaps and wins and pitfalls and struggles and things like that. You want people that are going to, tell you the truth. You want people that are doing hard things. You want people that have, some grit inside of them that are leaning in, not only asking for your help, but saying, you know what, David, I want to help you cross the finish line. Let's do this. So it's a big deal. Again, the people that you let into that inner world.
Yeah, I think you could put in a lot of different example by what you just said. For example, you know, I'm in sales, right? So maybe as an industry that I know nothing about. Like if I go to people that seems to know what they're doing, if I hang out with them long enough, I will probably learn more about that industry, learn more about the pitfall that I shouldn't be stepping in. Versus with the kids example, like you know our kids makes a joke, we're Asian, say, oh, we only want to hang out with people who get A's, right? It's kind of a joke, but we're nodding at the end, but not just for the A's, but a good person, good human being, like people who will, using a elementary school analogy, the teacher said you want people who fill your bucket, and you don't want people
Yeah.
who dip into your bucket. So I think that really sticks into my mind, like so simple. And then
Yeah.
they teach it in, I think, kindergarten, but I still use that. You want people to fill your bucket, so eventually, you could share, the water in your bucket. So that what comes around goes around.
Yeah, I love that. It's interesting. There's some people, when you come in contact with them, that there's a generousness about their spirit. They seem like they're full and they're kind of just splashing out everywhere, as opposed to some people that you're around who are a bit more fear-based and they guard their words. They're really, it's like their eyes are just looking at themselves all the time, as opposed to looking at opportunity and ideas and, hey, what does that person need and how can I connect that dot or do that kind of thing. And it's a real paradigm shift for some folks. And I'm with you though, that this idea that someone would add to the bucket, as it were, as opposed to take away, it's a it's almost kind of, it seems kind of, I don't know, hateful or something to say that out loud. But guess what? That's the reality. That's the world we live in.
And I think sometimes if you look hard enough, you could find the people that you think are close to you, and sometimes that will be scary. So,
Yeah.
especially if we are depressed or if we feel the failure, if you look, there are a lot of people who looks like you. But ask yourself, do you want to be in that stage for a long
Yeah.
period of time?
Yeah.
So, and sometimes we have to break out our own circle because if you say you're going to be better, if you say, let's say, for example, you want to quit smoking, then stop hanging around with people who smokes.
Yeah. Yeah. Isn't that funny? That's a good way to put it. I remember, for Assis was back in my 20s, I started hanging out with some people who just seemed to complain a lot. And it was kind of funny. Like that was, I mean, we would even go to a restaurant and nothing was ever good enough. They'd complain to the waiter about something or, things like that. Not that there aren't moments where you might need to say something, but it was, such a pattern. And I found myself like, trying to avoid them. And after a few months, I'm like, I don't want to be like that. I don't want to be somebody who's always looking for, the negative in other people or looking for mistakes or things like that. And I felt like their radar that was up was, kind of this dark cloud as opposed to, man, I wonder if this person needs me. Like, how can I encourage them? How can I, give life to them?
Yeah. And let's talk about self-awareness. I think this is a really important piece, not only to young people, to entrepreneur. It just, we're going through a lot, right? Every day we have,
Yeah.
operation that we handle. Maybe we have families that we have to take care of, and then we have some alone time. And then sometimes I feel sometimes I catch myself too. I talk down to myself.
Oh
But if
yeah.
I know that, like with your example, if I hang out with people I know that will cheer me up, and if I hang out with people I know always they will have something smart to say.
Yeah.
If I listen to them, just maybe talk for 5-10 minutes, I feel better. So
Yeah.
how
Yeah.
how do you think that self-awareness piece comes to mind, for entrepreneur?
Oh man, a great question. I think that, there's that might be one of the things that's missing most in people. And so, that's, which is kind of a big statement to make. Let me dip into these waters this way. My favorite quote is by a guy named Benjamin Disraeli, and he says the greatest good you can do for another is not to share with him your riches, but to reveal to him his own. So, ultimately, what is self-awareness? So if someone were to ask you the question, who are you? Well, what do you describe, right? Are you, well, I am a plumber, I am a lawyer, I am a roofer, whatever. Oh, no, you're not. That might be what you do for a living. In fact, there's a funny movie called Anger Management that where they have a moment, where this guy Dave sits down and, who are you? And he starts describing, what he does. Is wait, no. I want to know who you are, Dave. And he's, it's Jack Nicholson and Adam Sandler. It's absolutely hysterical, but it's funny because I think as a society we really kind of resonate with that, right? We become identified, right? The word identity by extrinsic, you know, uh, descriptions or nomenclature. Like, we let other people define us.
Hmm.
So one of the things that I do when I coach people, I work closely with Dr. Andy Garrett, and he has a program that he called the True North Blueprint. And I love this idea of true north versus magnetic north. Magnetic north, like a compass, you walk into a room, as it were, and the compass is kind of bouncing back and forth trying to find north, and it's literally reading the magnetic field around it. Well, we often do that, when we enter a room and we're just kind of reading the room to see where do I fit in, and and if we're in a really bad place, it's like we're wanting someone, would you please just tell me who I am, or tell me that I'm good enough, or we're looking for this extrinsic validation. And not that we don't need some of that, of course, but true north is what? True north is a plumb line. Like back in the day, right? They didn't have a level when they built a house. They literally used a plumb line, which is way more accurate than a level. It's literally 100% vertical. So inside of us, when we describe, like for instance, core values, right? And I like to say, what is it that your core, I'm talking the essence of who you are, what does your core happen to value the most? Of all the roughly maybe 80, English words that describe core values, what are the hierarchy of those things? And it's fascinating because those of us, who've done some work in this area, if you start identifying core values, convictions, right? They're different. That's what do you believe is right and wrong? Virtues is this idea of what type of a dent do I want to have on someone else? It's outward focused. What is it that I like to say, by the way, what is it that gives your goosebumps? Like what is it that makes the hair on the back of your neck stand up in a good way? Like what is it that puts that lump in your throat in a good way? What is it that breaks your heart? What is it that you're willing to die for? What is it that you're willing to live for? It's when you start describing all of these things, guess what? It's going to look very, very different from the person next to you. And when all of those various things start colliding, right? That's who you are. The context might be your career, right? The context might be, whatever happens in your home. The context is what we're doing right now. I'm having a conversation with somebody that I've never met in person, but I'm bringing, I hope, right, the fullest expression of who I am, to have a great, impact on you and your audience. And so self-awareness is way more valuable than than most things. And I'm going to actually dip my toe in the philosophical, spiritual waters here for a minute. So the question is where do we get the word authenticity? Right? It comes from the word author. We did not make us, right? I didn't make me. I didn't choose my eye color. I didn't choose my taste buds. Guess what? I didn't choose my personality. And those of us who have children know that our kids come out of the gate very different, very hardwired. Within just weeks and months, you can tell, their sweet little essence is so different. And as children are growing, they're not thinking, like you and me, they're not thinking about being authentic. They're not thinking about, their place in the world. They're just doing their deal and acting out of alignment with who they are. When life happens, right, they get slapped around a little bit and they get hurt. Well, then you start to question, well, maybe I'm not enough. Maybe, I don't have what it takes. Maybe the things that I love are I'm going to get laughed at. I mean, we start to question all of that stuff. Well, then you go through this phase and doctors call it, in your late teens, early 20s, self-actualization. Well, I'll be honest. I think some people don't go through that. They choose to, they just choose to be a human doing and not a human being. And what's neat though, is when you self-actualize and hopefully, you have parents, who raise you, right? Cause you to rise. They're asking you questions like, hey, David, what do you value the most in this life? Let's get out a pencil and paper and start identifying, right? Identity. Literally just writing these things down. What does your core happen to value? Let's talk about strengths. Well, let me tell you what I see, right? You're holding up a mirror, to those around you saying, do you see what I see? This is awesome. And, identity and authenticity is not formed by answering great questions alone. You have to, but we're made for relationships. So young people need to be raised. They need to be told, hey, dude, you're awesome. And I not only love you, but I like you. And let me tell you what I like and what I love about you. And then they dare to believe that those, the greatest good, the hierarchy of things in them is worth expressing and exploring and things like that. And I just think that's, that again, self-awareness is really, what is it? It's labeling the richest, parts of you, and then living out of that richness and helping others do the same thing.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. I think that topic alone, those two words, we can spend another hour, just talking to that. And I think you're right. You're parent, you're going through what the kids are going through, and sometimes with self-awareness, now they have self-image. Even for entrepreneur, we grown up have an image of what a successful entrepreneur looks like. They got to have their private jets. They're going to have like
Yeah.
7 cars. They're going to have
Yeah.
all these watches. But maybe, that's good. It's nice to have, but you don't need all that to be able to be successful. A lot of people that names we might never heard of are very successful entrepreneur. Only if you get to know that industry or in that category, then you find this famous people who you might never heard of. And I think by going through the awareness and a lot of time image, especially with the day and age of social media, we have to appear to be success on our social media posts, and we have to have all this and that with hashtag or something like that. I think it kind of messes people out. Like
Yeah.
in that case, if you have your mentor, you develop your skills in the old days, and you develop maybe 5-10 years, then you on your road to success. But now with social media, you have to be like that in the next 30 days. If not, you're failing.
That's
So
right.
sometimes we get, people tell us that sometimes I think it messes up the self-awareness piece, because as you're mentioning, David, it will take you time to go through that search, maybe to talk to the right people, maybe to fail, a couple of times to be able to find, who you really are. And if you ask, kids, teens, their what a core value are, what they would say? I don't know.
Yeah. Well, and most adults don't know, honestly.
Yeah.
It's really stunning when you start, walking into these waters with people, how kind of clammed up they get, because it's, they don't know how to answer these questions. So here's what's fascinating. You talk about success, like, I like that question. What is your definition of success?
Mm.
Well, guess what? If you don't know who you are and what you value, right, your definition of success, your view of the world and identity and authenticity and all that kind of stuff, it's going to be somebody else's, and it's not going to be yours. What's really fascinating is when Dr. Andy says, how do you know when you have identified, who you are, and you start living from that place, right? Well, how about this? How do you know you haven't found it? Well, anxiety, depression, avoidance, apathy, social anxiety. There's so many negatives that come with living outside of your own soul. Well, how do you know you found it? Well, you start to feel genuine. You start to feel free. You start to feel natural. You start to enter situations in groups of people with, a generousness, as opposed to, a 12-year-old standing in the corner like, pick me, pick me. So self-awareness is absolutely vital. You will never find success unless you are self-aware. How about this? What if, you are living a successful life, but you haven't given name to it? Literally, you might have actually stumbled into a successful life, right? Your family is happy and healthy. You're doing activities that you enjoy. You're using your strengths to the fullest. But if you've not done the work, if you've not done the self-awareness work to give those things value and to hold weight to them and to name them, you won't be experiencing the fulfillment that you're looking for. So it's kind of a complex subject in a lot of ways. If you don't have self-awareness, guess what? Your definition of success might be Joe Rogan's. It might be your dad's. It might be your brother's. It might be, whatever political figure you happen to look up to. But once you've identified that plumb line, you've identified the goosebumps, you've identified what you value, all that stuff, all of a sudden, success starts to look like something, and you can relax into it, as opposed to white knuckle your life and try to generate something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree 100%, David. And to the listener, you could have self-awareness, the discussion inside your head in different stages, right? So when we talk about success, for some people, $500,000 is a lot of money, it's successful, but sometimes we have billionaires who have $5 billion thinks they're not successful. So
Yeah.
I think if you haven't figured out that part, do you spend some time on it to do that? Because if you, let's say you're Elon Musk for a day, right? Do you really want to go through all the things that he's going through in a daily basis?
Yeah.
Like, is that it's your relationship, or if your little hobbies that you have, are you able to have time to do all those hobbies? So like, even if you trade spot with whoever you think is successful, like, do you really want that or ready for it today?
Yeah, it's interesting. I'll just be a little bit vulnerable here. So a couple of weeks ago, I bought a pickup from my brother-in-law, and it's 19 years old. It's almost 2-decade old pickup. It's kind of rusty in the bottom and this and that, but I really liked it and I wanted it. Could I go buy a new truck? Well, sure. But so today, my wife she loves going to estate sales and yard sales and to, thrift stores and everything else. And I told her about a week ago, I said, hey, I kind of want to get one of those, those cabinet things that sits in the back of a pickup. You can put your tools in, and I don't even know what you call those. But so Lisa was over at Goodwill this morning, and she sends me a picture of this, this toolbox, whatever. And she says, hey, I think this will fit your truck. It's only $30. And so here's my definition of success today, right? Again, could I go buy a truck and one of those bed tool holder things? Yes. My definition of success is my wife gets a total kick out of finding something at a thrift store that I like. That's just, she loves doing that. And I know full well that when she takes a picture and I'm like, way to go, that's awesome. Like, she just lights up. I found David something that he kind of likes. Like, she gets totally jazzed about that. And I would much rather have that experience driving a 19-year-old pickup with a $30 tool holder, whatever, in the bed of the truck that Lisa found, because it brought her joy, right? And a lot of people would think, wait a second, if I don't have the latest and greatest everything, people are going to think that I'm poor, or people are going to think that I'm not successful. Guess what? I have a wife of 25 years who loves me. I've got a son who just finished his first year in college, who's just a magnificent human being. I've got a daughter who I get to do concerts with. I'm a vocalist, and she's a first chair violinist at Vanderbilt at Children's Orchestra. And the love that we share as a family inside of our modest home, and the quality of conversations and the bond that we have is so far superior to whatever pickup or whatever object of choice that you could name that would somehow give me one dopamine hit from somebody giving me the look like, oh, nice truck, dude. But guess what? That has come because I've been through some hard times. I've been through some fire. I've been through a furnace of sorts that's burned away some of that silly stuff in my heart. Back in my 20s and 30s, guess what? I probably would have appreciated a really nice truck. And because I would want people to think that somehow David Osk has arrived. Now my badge of honor is driving an old pickup where the stereo doesn't even work and there's a tape deck in it. And my wife just found me a $30 tool holder that I don't even know what the name of that thing is, because it gives her joy. I feel like that moment today, especially when I go out there and, in the driveway here and put it in there, and she gets the joy of seeing the expression on my face. That's rich. That's, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. That is rich. And has nothing to do with money, has nothing to do with anything except, I have a great relationship with Lisa. I'll say one other thing here too. And I forget where I first heard this. So I think that if someone wants to start this journey of self-awareness, I'll just make a big truth claim here. I'm quoting someone else and I just forget who it is, but they said that life is all about relationships. Period.
It is. Yeah, it is.
Period. Like, the entire point of the human existence is relationship. And what's really fascinating is, the rest of it is, can be a really nice context. I mean, some of it's actually pretty horrible, but, there's a lot of beauty and stuff in life. But, when you put the relationship, well, hopefully with you and God first, right? And then the relationship with me, myself, and I, right? Love your neighbor as you love yourself. Like, get to know who you are and the riches that God put in you. Then what you can give away. What's inside of you to hand to someone else. And that's when life starts getting really rich. The rest of it is just a context to experience relationship in.
Thank you so much for sharing, David. Like you open a big box of questions that I can no longer, being general and individualized for that question. So for a listener who really wanted to ask you more about, finding themselves, what does success look like, what would be the best way to reach out to you? And can you talk a little bit more about your new book?
Oh, yeah. Thank you. So I'm writing a book called The Guardians of Grit, and I'm really excited about it. There's a larger movement that I'm working on with some partners here, but this book is largely driven toward men, to dads. Again, it's going to benefit anybody, but it's this idea of, what is grit? Well, grit is, I'm going to do hard things over a long period of time, because what's on the other side of the hill, as it were, is worth fighting for. Why is grit important? It's because your life is built on decisions. If you don't have the ability to make decisions in the face of fear and hardship, you're not going to have a good life, period. And if you do have the ability to do hard things over a long period of time, you're going to build not only a home, right? You're going to build a castle. You're going to build a kingdom that's really fun to live in. And again, back to the book here, it's like this idea of a guardian. Well, what is that? What's a guardian of grit? A guardian of grit is kind of what I alluded to earlier. It's someone who is holding up a mirror, to their son or daughter, or to their, the athlete, if they're a coach, right? If they're a mentor, to whoever they're mentoring. And they're saying something like, hey, look at this. Do you see what I see? Let me mirror back to you the riches that I see in you and validate those things. It's, if you see something, say something. And again, it's not nice shoes or nice shirt. It's you're galvanizing and validating character strengths and those things that, again, convictions, values, virtues, goosebumps, all that kind of stuff. You're saying, hey, by the way, when you said this yesterday, that was awesome. I hope you do more of that. So I'm really excited about that. And as far as getting a hold of me, my website is davidask.com. And you can email me at hello@davidask.com.
David, thank you so much for coming on to the show today. Like we had discussed a lot of open-ended question. There's no right or wrong. And I think, the most important takeaway that I have for everyone today is, just to really go through a self-awareness journey and, really find out who you are. Like, do you really want 7 cars, or do you only, like David, want one car that he wanted, and then he will be happy? So it could save you a lot of money too at the end.
Yeah, that's right. It sure can. Yeah.
Thank you so much for coming on to the show today.
A pleasure. Thanks for having me.